in the glamorous rhythm of Lagos life. Augusta Obion seemed to have every dream within her grasp, her own brand. Excellent academic achievements, radiant photos with her white Mercedes, and a romantic love with Benjamin Best, a man no less famous than her. Yet, behind that dazzling facade were hidden cracks. Augusta gradually became withdrawn. The love once celebrated on social media turned into a chain of jealousy and control from her seemingly perfect boyfriend. Until one night, Augusta called her mother in tears, revealing the conflicts that could no longer be hidden. And that was the last time her trembling voice was ever heard. When the police broke into Benjamin's apartment, the scene that greeted them was a blood-soaked room, signs of a fierce struggle, and Augusta's mutilated body. What turned a dream relationship into a tragedy that shocked Nigeria? Why did a young, promising star have to die at the hands of the very man who was once seen as her protector? Lagos, a vibrant city with over 20 million people, where dreams are built, but sometimes also destroyed. Here, Augusta Obion shone like a star. At 21, she had built a small empire in the virtual world, with over 100,000 followers on Instagram. Every photo she posted garnered thousands of likes and hundreds of comments from adoring fans. Augusta was not only beautiful, but also intelligent. At Lead University, one of Nigeria's most prestigious schools, she consistently achieved excellent academic results. Friends described her as diligent, always ready to help, and naturally able to connect with everyone around her. Augusta's life seemed like a perfect picture: a white Mercedes, designer outfits, and luxurious parties. However, behind the glamorous facade, Augusta faced difficulties in her relationship with her boyfriend, Benjamin Best. Benjamin, nicknamed Killboy, was also a famous influencer on Instagram. He had a charming appearance and a lavish lifestyle, no less so than Augusta's. On the surface, they were the perfect couple that everyone admired, but Augusta knew that Benjamin had sides that no one else saw, times when he became jealous and wanted to control everything in her life. Despite this, Augusta still believed that her love could change everything. She thought that if she was patient and loved him long enough, Benjamin would become the man she dreamed of. This belief shaped how she viewed the relationship, even as the warning signs began to appear more clearly. Benjamin Best was not just a successful influencer, but also a man with an extremely controlling personality. In the first months of the relationship, Augusta thought Benjamin's attention to every detail of her life was an expression of love. He wanted to know where she was, who she was with, and what she was doing at all times of the day. Initially, Augusta felt loved and cared for. Gradually, that attention turned into suffocating control. Benjamin began to forbid Augusta from seeing certain friends, especially male friends. He sought to monitor her every activity on social media, checked her messages, and even demanded the passwords to her personal accounts. Whenever Augusta objected, Benjamin would have violent outbursts, only to later apologize and promise to change, citing his overwhelming love for her as the reason for his actions. Augusta, with her strong belief in the power of love, always found ways to justify Benjamin's behavior. She thought his jealousy and control stemmed from being hurt in the past, and that if she was patient and loving enough, he would change. She began to alter her lifestyle to avoid arguments. Augusta canceled get-togethers with friends and turned down invitations to events Benjamin didn't want her to attend. Augusta's closest friends were the first to notice the change. The once vibrant, cheerful girl gradually became withdrawn and distant. Phone calls with friends became less frequent and shorter. When invited out, Augusta often made excuses to refuse or made vague plans, only to cancel at the last minute. Friends began to whisper about this unusual change. They noticed Augusta was no longer as happy as before. Whenever asked, Augusta would smile and reply that everything was fine. She was just busy with work and school. But her eyes no longer shone as brightly. Her smile seemed forced, and at times, friends would catch her looking dazed, as if lost in a worrisome thought. Mrs. Cordelia, with a mother's intuition, also sensed the change in her daughter. Weekly phone calls still happened, but Augusta's voice was no longer as natural as before. There were times her mother could hear a tremor in her daughter's voice, or unusual silences, as Augusta seemed to be weighing whether to share something or not. Mrs. Cordelia often asked if her daughter was okay, and Augusta always replied that everything was normal. Her mother shouldn't worry. But Mrs. Cordelia couldn't help but worry. This mother had raised Augusta and knew every nuance in her daughter's voice and behavior. Something was wrong, but Augusta adamantly refused to disclose it. On social media, everything appeared normal. Augusta and Benjamin still posted beautiful photos, still received thousands of likes and admiring comments. But Augusta's posting frequency began to decrease. She shared fewer personal moments. And even when posting photos with Benjamin, her smile no longer seemed as natural. Their toxic relationship became more and more serious. Benjamin began to display increasingly clear, emotionally abusive behavior. He frequently yelled at Augusta over trivial matters, accused her of being unfaithful, and used degrading language. In those moments, Augusta often endured silently, hoping that Benjamin's anger would pass. As time went on, Augusta became more isolated. She began to distance herself from her closest friends, even when they proactively reached out. She spent most of her time at home or with Benjamin, as if her world had shrunk to just him. With each passing day, Augusta lost more of her confidence and positive energy. The situation began to escalate in the final months of 2023. Arguments between Augusta and Benjamin became more violent and frequent, and Augusta began to show clear signs of fear. She no longer called her mother as often as before, and when she did, Mrs. Cordelia could sense the anxiety in her daughter's voice. The tipping point occurred on July 11th, 2023. That afternoon, Augusta called her mother in tears. Her voice was trembling, full of fear, something Mrs. Cordelia had never heard from her daughter before. Augusta spoke of a violent argument with Benjamin, but didn't go into detail. The call didn't last long, and Augusta hastily hung up when she heard footsteps. That was the last time Mrs. Cordelia ever heard her daughter's voice. After the tearful call on July 11th, 2023, Mrs. Cordelia fell into a state of panic when she couldn't reach Augusta. 4 days passed, like a long nightmare. Every call went straight to voicemail. Every message met with silence. This was completely unusual for Augusta, a girl who always answered her mother's calls. No matter how busy she was, Mrs. Cordelia began a desperate search. She called all of Augusta's friends she had numbers for, hoping someone would know where her daughter was. Augusta's closest friends also expressed concern when asked. They admitted that in recent months, Augusta had become distant and less communicative, but they also didn't know where she was. Augusta's roommate at the university dormitory provided the first clue. She said that Augusta hadn't been back to the room since July 11th, and her personal belongings were still untouched. More worryingly, Augusta also hadn't shown up for classes, which was extremely uncharacteristic for such an excellent student. When asked about Benjamin, the roommate suggested that Augusta might be at his apartment. That's where she had spent a lot of time in recent months. However, when Mrs. Cordelia tried to contact Benjamin, he also didn't answer his phone. His number seemed to have been disconnected or turned off completely. A growing sense of unease filled Mrs. Cordelia. With a mother's experience, she knew that something was terribly wrong. Augusta's last call, her trembling, fearful voice, and the way she hastily hung up all signaled something serious. On the morning of July 15th, after 4 days of desperate and fruitless searching, Mrs. Cordelia decided to go to Benjamin's apartment. She had memorized the address from times Augusta had shared about her boyfriend's residence. The apartment was located in a decent residential area in Lagos, where successful young people often chose to live. Upon arrival, the first thing Mrs. Cordelia noticed was Augusta's familiar white Mercedes, parked outside the building. The car was still there, but it was dusty and appeared to have been parked for quite some time. Mrs. Cordelia's heart pounded as she realized that if Augusta's car was here, her daughter must be inside the apartment. But why wasn't she answering her phone? Mrs. Cordelia went up to Benjamin's floor and began knocking on the door. The knocking echoed in the silent hallway, but no one answered. She continued to knock harder, calling Augusta and Benjamin's names, but was met only with silence. A strange, foul odor wafted from beneath the door, making her feel nauseous and extremely anxious. Neighbors began to come out to see what was happening. Some said they had also smelled a strange odor from that apartment for the past few days, but thought it might be due to garbage or a clogged drain. No one suspected it could be a sign of a terrible tragedy. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Mrs. Cordelia immediately contacted the police, the Aja police station, the closest in the area. Quickly dispatched a team of investigators to the scene. The police officers arrived and also noticed the unusual signs that Mrs. Cordelia had found the Mercedes, the locked apartment, and the increasingly heavy foul odor. After completing the necessary legal procedures and receiving a warrant, the police decided to break down the apartment door. The sturdy wooden door gave way with a loud crash, and immediately a strong stench rushed out, causing even the seasoned officers to step back and cover their noses. The scene inside the apartment was a living nightmare. The furniture in the living room was overturned, in disarray. Chairs and tables were pushed over. Decorative items were scattered all over the floor. The wallpaper had dried bloodstains, forming dark brown patches. Everything indicated that a fierce struggle had taken place there. But the most horrifying sight awaited them in the bedroom. Augusta's body was found in an indescribable state. She had been dead for several days, and the characteristic heat of Lagos had accelerated the decomposition process. The scene was so horrific that even police officers with years of experience had to step outside to compose themselves. The crime scene showed that Augusta had been savagely attacked. She had been stabbed multiple times, and even more terrifyingly, her body showed signs of dismemberment after she had died. This detail shocked even the most veteran investigators who had witnessed many other heinous crimes throughout their careers. Mrs. Cordelia, waiting outside, sensed the gravity of the situation from the expressions on the police officers' faces when she was informed that her daughter's body had been found. She completely collapsed. A mother's worst nightmare had become reality. The crime scene investigation took many hours. Forensic experts were called in to document the state of the body and collect evidence. An important detail discovered was a handwritten letter at the scene. The content of this letter was believed to be written by Benjamin, but the police did not release details of its contents to serve the ongoing investigation. Benjamin's absence from the scene added to the suspicion. all of his personal belongings had disappeared, leaving only signs that someone had hastily packed up and left. His phone and laptop were also no longer in the apartment. Police immediately launched a manhunt for Benjamin Best. However, they quickly discovered that he had already left Nigeria. Through immigration records checks, police determined that Benjamin had used a fake passport to fly to Sierra Leone on July the 13th, just 2 days after Augusta's last call to her mother. The fact that Benjamin could acquire a fake passport worth up to $25,000 showed that he had carefully prepared his escape plan. This also raised questions about whether the murder had been premeditated. Mrs. Cordelia, despite her profound grief, did not give up on demanding justice for her daughter. She was determined to cooperate with law enforcement agencies to bring Benjamin to justice. The fight for justice for Augusta had begun, and it would be a long and difficult journey. The case quickly became the focus of Nigerian media and the online community. The image of Augusta, a beautiful, successful young woman, along with the brutal nature of the crime, sparked a wave of public outrage. People began to question the issues of domestic violence and the safety of women in Nigerian society. The trial for Benjamin Best has not yet taken place. After being extradited to Nigeria on April 19, 2025, Benjamin is currently being held at a Lagos prison, awaiting official trial at the Lagos State High Court. However, with the clear evidence collected at the crime scene, along with the nearly 2-year manhunt, the case is expected to attract significant public and media attention when the trial officially begins. Legal experts predict that Benjamin will face serious charges, including premeditated murder and dismemberment of a corpse. A crucial factor in the case is the contradictory posts Benjamin made on Instagram after his escape. While on the run, he made vague confessions and later denied them, creating important digital evidence for the prosecution. The Nigerian justice system will face a major challenge in handling this case. The complexity of the international extradition process, coupled with the serious nature of the crime, requires a fair and transparent trial. Augusta's family, especially Mrs. Cordelia, is waiting for the day justice is served. This case is not only legally important, but also has deep social significance, potentially setting a major precedent for handling cases of domestic violence and femicide in Nigeria. The case of Augusta Osedion is not an isolated incident, but a painful symbol of the ongoing crisis of domestic violence and femicide in Nigeria. Her tragic story exposes deep-seated issues in society, from patriarchal culture to the lack of a system to protect women. Recent studies show an alarming number: 2/3 of women in Lagos State have experienced domestic violence at different levels. More concerning is that many cases are never reported due to cultural, social, and economic barriers. Nigerian women often face pressure from family and society, forcing them to endure in silence instead of seeking help. The statistics on femicide in Nigeria are even more frightening. The femicide rate here is significantly higher than the global average, with an estimated 401 cases recorded in 2022 alone. The actual number could be much higher due to underreporting and incomplete records from rural areas. Each of these numbers represents a life stolen, a family shattered, and a society that has failed to protect its most vulnerable members. Augusta's case also highlights serious gaps in the Nigerian justice system. From the first days after the body was discovered, the investigation process revealed many structural problems. Reports from sources indicate slowness in the initial police response, partly due to their tendency to view domestic violence as a private matter rather than a serious crime that requires immediate intervention. This attitude reflects a deep-seated cultural problem in Nigerian society, where family issues are often considered to be resolved internally rather than through the legal system. This has created a conducive environment for domestic violence to continue without adequate punishment. The arrest and extradition of Benjamin Best became a prime example of the complex challenges in tracking down cross-border criminals. The fact that he was able to escape a Sierra Leone prison and continue to evade capture under multiple fake identities for over a year raised serious questions about the capacity and coordination of law enforcement agencies in the region. This nearly 2-year manhunt not only demonstrates the inefficiency of the system, but also exposes loopholes in border security and international cooperation. The reality that Benjamin could travel through multiple countries and continents with fake documents shows the urgent need to strengthen international cooperation in the fight against transnational crime. A notable aspect of this case is the crucial role of the victim's family in ensuring justice is served. The perseverance of Mrs. Cordelia, and especially the efforts of Augusta's brother in tracking and locating Benjamin, were key factors that helped the case progress. While this, on one hand, shows the family's love and determination, on the other hand, it reflects a deep-seated lack of trust in the capabilities of law enforcement agencies. The fact that the victim's family had to take such an active role in tracking down the perpetrator shows a justice system with many limitations. In an ideal society, justice should not depend on the victim's family's perseverance and financial ability, but should be guaranteed by a strong and effective system. The case of Augusta Osedian has ultimately become a wake-up call for Nigerian society about the urgent need to reform the justice system, strengthen protection for women, and change cultural attitudes that can contribute to the perpetuation of domestic violence. Augusta Osedian's story did not end with her tragic death in July 2023. Instead, it became the beginning of a long struggle for justice and social change. Her mother, Mrs. Cordelia, has transformed the pain of losing her daughter into a motivation to raise awareness about the issue of domestic violence in Nigeria. Throughout the nearly 2 years since losing her daughter, Mrs. Cordelia has not given up on seeking justice for a single day. She has worked tirelessly with law enforcement agencies, from the Nigerian police to Interpol, to ensure that Benjamin Best cannot escape punishment. Her persistence has become an inspiration for many other families facing similar circumstances. Augusta's case has shaken the online community in Nigeria and the West African region. Millions of people have followed the manhunt for Benjamin, turning this story into a social phenomenon. Hashtags like Justice for Augusta and End Domestic Violence have spread widely on social media platforms, creating a new wave of awareness about violence against women. In Nigeria, statistics show that every few hours, a woman dies from domestic violence. This number is not just a dry statistic, but represents family tragedies, dreams crushed, and futures stolen. Augusta's story has brought this harsh reality to light, forcing society to confront an issue they have been silent about for too long. This case has also spurred important discussions about the need to reform the legal system, strengthen support for domestic violence victims, and develop educational programs on healthy relationships. Non-governmental organizations and women's rights advocacy groups have used Augusta's story as a tool to call for structural changes in society. Augusta represents thousands of other women across Nigeria and Africa, daughters, mothers, sisters whose dreams and hopes have been taken away by violence. She is not just a victim, but has become a symbol of the struggle against a culture of silence and indifference to domestic violence. Augusta's story calls on everyone to speak out when they see signs of violence, to dare to ask about the well-being of those around them, and to act to break the cycle of violence instead of standing by and watching. It reminds us that violence against women is not a private matter, but a responsibility of the entire society. Although Augusta has been silenced forever, her story continues to speak out powerfully. It inspires others to stand up for justice, to change laws, and to create a safer society for women. In her death, Augusta has become a living force for change, a beacon of hope that such tragedies will no longer be repeated in the future.